In this module, we'll take a look at the ESXi DOM collector service in vSphere. Firstly, we'll take a look at the different settings we can configure on our vCenter server. Then we'll go over to one of our hosts and configure it to dump its memory content over to this ESXi DOM collector. And also we'll do a test dump to just make sure that works here. Okay, so let's get right into this here. The ESXi DOM collector can be used to store memory dumps from our ESXi host. So this is useful should the host crash unexpectedly, or should it have a purple screen of death, which is equivalent to the blue screen of death in Windows. So by default, in the event of a crash, the VM kernel would dump these logs to the ESXi storage on the local ESXi host. If this host was to reboot, we should still have a copy of these dumps. If we are booting our ESXi from a removable media, however, or from SAN, these dumps would not be captured. So most importantly, for these hosts, we would need a way to capture the dumps in a centralized DOM collector. So this is exactly what the ESXi DOM collector service provides. It provides a centralized location for storing of the memory dumps from our ESXi host. In vSphere 6, this service is installed by default on the Windows-based vCenter server and the vCenter server appliance. However, the service is not started, so we will need to manually start this and configure the startup type. This is done at the vCenter server level. Okay. We have two settings that we could configure there. Once we get into the web client, the vSphere web client, we'll take a look at that. But basically, we could set the destination port of the ESXi DOM collector, which is 6500 by default, and also we could set the repository size. By default, 2 gigs is allocated for our ESXi dumps. So if you have a large inventory of ESXi hosts, you'd want to increase this. Also, if your environment, if you're seeing a lot of purple screen of death, or if you want to retain the logs for a longer period, you would want to increase the storage size for your dumps. Okay, but either of these services, once we modify the port or the repository size, we will need to restart the service. So let's go over to our vSphere web client and take a look at the ESXi dump collector service. Okay, before we go to our web client, these are the default locations where the dumps are captured. Okay, if you're running the vCenter server appliance, this would be the directory. And if we are running the Windows-based vCenter server, this would be the directory. So let me pull up my vSphere web client here. Okay, I am at home here. If I go to administration at the bottom, then system configuration. And if I go to services now, I should see the DOM collector service in here almost to the bottom. So if I click on the DOM collector service there, we just have two configurations here. So if I hit edit over on the right, this is where I'll configure the default destination port for the DOM collector, and this is the repository size. We can set this from 1 to 10 gig. So if you're running a lot of hosts in your environment, you'd want to increase this too. And if you notice in this column here, restart is required once we make any change on these values. Okay, so this is where we would configure this. If you need to make any change, we'll modify it there, and then just come back on the service itself and then restart it. There is another setting we can configure here, which is the startup type. So we have three startup type here. We could set this to start automatically when the OS start. We could do it manually, or we could disable this um, service when the OS starts. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out of this here. Let's take a look at I'm running the Windows-based vCenter server, so let's take a look at the directory where it stored the ESXi dumps. So I have a remote desktop connection over to my vCenter server. This is located in my program data, VMware at the bottom here, VMware ESXi dump collector. So this is where the dumps would be collected. Okay, so let me just minimize this. For redirecting of our dump, we would use a ESX CLI to do that. Also, we can configure a host to dump their memory using host profiles. So ideally, you may want to configure one host to dump its memory through the ESX CLI, and then use this as a reference host. Then you would use a host profile to deploy those settings on additional hosts. Actually, we'll take a look at the setting where it's located to on one of our host profile. But let's get across to our ESXi 4 first and just redirect the dump to this collector. So let me pull up ESXi 4 here. I still need to just enable shell access to this, so let me do that really fast. So I need to just enable shell access, and I need to enable SSH. So then I'll just use my SSH client and point it to this host. So this host is at IP 170. So let me just minimize this now and bring up PuTTY. That's a connection I have to another ESXi host. Let me just open a new one here for host 4. 92168.72.1. Okay, so this is a connection I have for ESXi 4. Let me just go ahead and log in here. Okay, so let's check our current dump settings. So if we do a ESX CLI system core dump and just do network, and we'll just do get to get the current config for this, and we'll see that it's not enabled. You notice it's false here, so we'll go ahead and configure this now. So firstly, what I'll do is redirect this ESXi host to the dump collector, and then we'll enable, then we'll turn on the redirection. So let me do that again, ESX CLI. So we're doing system core dump, then network. So I want to set this. So I'm setting this on a VM kernel, or I need to specify the VM kernel port here. So I'll set C as an option there. Before I continue, let me just pull up my ESXi 4 in my web client and take a look at, show you guys where that is located here. So I'm over at 4. Okay, if we go under networking, so we want this to go over our management network. So this is at the 170, the same IP we're connecting with PuTTY over to. So this is located on VM kernel 0 here, or our vmnic 0. So let me just set that here. So vmk0, and then I'll put the IP address for that VM NIC. So sorry, my VM kernel port. So I'll specify that with an I for IP address here. So I'll do 192.168.92, and then my DOM collector is located at 156. And then the default port that we're connecting to is 6500. So I'll need to set the port here too, and it will do that with the O, and then specify the port. Okay, so this here we're configuring the redirection. Next, what we'll do is turn on the redirection. So let me do that now. So this is ESXi system core dump. I'll do network set, do E here, and I need to set this to true. Okay, so hit enter there. So the next thing we'll want to do is to test this, make sure it's configured now. So let me do ESXi system core dump network check. Okay, and just hit on enter here. Okay, so it's verified now. So it's verified that the configure NetDump server is running. What I can also do is just pull up back the network config here that we did when we started. And this is our current setting. It's enable, and it's running over the VMK0. This is the port we're pointing to, and this is the core dump server. So let's take a look now from our host profile where we can configure this too. So let me just minimize this here and pull up my vSphere web client. So if I go back to home here and then come to monitoring and host profiles here, I already generated a host profile for ESXi1, which was configured for our dumps already. So if I come over here and then edit the settings for this profile, and then come to our network setting here. This should be under network configuration. Okay, so here it is, our network core dump settings. So the same settings that we could have configured from the ESX CLI, we can also do this here. So generally, if you're doing this on a lot of hosts, you could just do it one time on the ESX CLI and then just create a host profile and apply it to the remaining of your hosts in your infrastructure. Okay, so this is all relating to our ESXi memory dumps. So I'll just close off at this module for now, and in the next module we'll start off with a discussion and demonstration of our syslog collector that's built into our vCenter.